Thanksgiving at my aunt's house in suburban Ohio was always a big deal. The air smelled of roasted turkey, pumpkin pie, and that weird cranberry sauce nobody touched but Grandma insisted on making. The living room glowed with the flicker of a fireplace, and the TV blared a football game, Buckeyes versus Wolverines, naturally sparking friendly trash talk among the cousins. After dinner, with plates cleared and bellies stuffed, we gathered around the dining table for our annual tradition, a low-stakes poker game. A few bucks, some loose change, maybe a Starbucks gift card tossed in for laughs. It was supposed to be fun, a way to keep the holiday vibe going. I'm not much of a gambler. At 30, I'm just a regular guy, a software engineer with a beat-up Ford Mustang I've been nursing since college. Emily, sat next to me, her teacher's smile lighting up the room as she sipped hot cider. She's the kind of woman who can calm a storm with a look, and I was saving every penny to buy us a house after the wedding. Across the table was my cousin Jake, 35, slick as ever in his tailored blazer, tossing around stories about his latest real estate deal or his shiny new Tesla Model S parked in the driveway. Jake's wife, Sarah, scrolled Instagram beside him, flashing her designer watch every chance she got. My dad, a retired factory worker with a flannel shirt and a heart bigger than his wallet, was there too, chuckling at Jake's tales like they were old fishing stories. Then there was Uncle Tom, Jake's dad, nodding proudly every time his son opened his mouth. The game started light. $5 here, a couple of quarters there. Emily tossed in a candy bar, joking it was high stakes. Everyone laughed, except Jake. He leaned back, swirling his whiskey glass, and sighed. This is kid stuff. Can we play for real already? His grin was all teeth like a shark circling a kiddie pool. Before anyone could protest, he upped the ante to $50 a hand, then 100. The table went quiet. My cousin Mike, a mail carrier who'd rather be watching the game, fidgeted with his chips. Aunt Linda, who runs a bakery, muttered something about keeping it friendly, but Jake wasn't having it. He wanted to flex. Then he did it. With a smug chuckle, Jake reached into his pocket, pulled out the key fob to his Tesla, and dropped it on the table with a clink. 80 grand, he said, eyes scanning the room. That's what this baby's worth. Who's got the guts to match me? The room froze. Mike coughed. Aunt Linda gasped. Uncle Tom grinned like Jake had just won an Oscar. Sarah snapped a photo of the key, probably for her followers. My dad shot me a nervous glance, like he knew trouble was brewing. I felt my pulse kick up. I wasn't holding junk 310s, solid as hell in a game like this, but it wasn't about the cards. Jake wasn't playing poker, he was playing King of the Hill, and we were all supposed to bow. I'd seen him pull this before, bragging about his Miami condo, his VIP invites to tech conferences, even shading my job like it was some dead-end gig. Earlier at dinner, he'd brushed off Dad's toast like it was nothing, leaving the old man red-faced. Now here he was, turning our family game into his personal stage. Emily squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes steady. I took a breath, reached for my keys, and set them down slow. My Mustang. Paid off, but barely worth a tenth of his ride. I'm in, I said, voice low but firm. Jake's laugh was sharp, like a blade. Your clunker? What's that? 10 grand on a good day? He leaned forward, daring me to flinch. The table watched, holding their breath. Dad's jaw tightened. Uncle Tom smirked. But Emily? She just smiled, like she knew something Jake didn't. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a game anymore. The room went dead quiet, like someone had hit pause on a movie. My Mustang keys sat there on the table, looking pitiful next to Jake's sleek Tesla fob. I could feel every pair of eyes on me Dad's nervous squint. Aunt Linda's wide-eyed shock. Mike pretending to study his empty beer bottle. Emily's hand was still on mine under the table, steady as a rock. I glanced at my cards again, 3 10s staring back at me. Solid. Better than solid. Well, this wasn't about the hand anymore. It was about Jake, sitting there like he owned the whole damn holiday, daring me to back down. Jake's laugh cut through the silence, sharp and mean. You're clunker, he said, leaning back in his chair. What's that worth? 10 grand on a good day? You serious right now? He shook his head, like I was some kid who'd wandered into the grown-ups game. Sarah snorted, tapping her nails on her phone, probably live tweeting her husband's big moment. Uncle Tom chuckled, muttering something about bold moves. The rest of the family just stared, waiting for me to fold, apologize, or maybe vanish into thin air. I felt a burn in my chest. Not anger exactly, more like that feeling when you've had enough. Jake had been pulling this crap all day. At dinner, he droned on about his new condo in Miami, how he was this close to sealing a deal with some Silicon Valley hotshot. When Dad tried to share a story about fixing up his old Chevy, Jake cut him off with a smirk, saying, "Nobody drives those relics anymore, Uncle Ray." And now, here he was, turning our Thanksgiving poker game into his personal ego trip. "You don't have the guts," he'd said earlier, when I passed on seconds of pie to save room for Emily's dessert. Like I was too soft, too small time for his world. I locked eyes with him. I said, "I'm in." Jake's grin faltered for half a second, but he covered it fast. "All right, hotshot," he said, reaching for his wallet. He pulled out a stack of Bill's crisp hundreds, fanned out like he was in a rap video, and slapped 10 grand on the table. 10,000 cash. "Let's see you match that." Sarah gasped, then giggled, whispering something about how epic this was. The family erupted into murmurs. Aunt Linda clutched her necklace like it might jump off and join the pot. Mike whistled low, muttering, "Jesus, Jake, it's Thanksgiving, not Vegas." Dad's face went pale. "What the hell are you doing, son?" he hissed, leaning close. "We don't have that kind of money. Just back off." I could see the worry in his eyes, the same look he got when the factory laid off half his crew years back. He wasn't wrong. I didn't have 10 grand lying around. My savings were tied up in wedding plans, a down payment for a house we hadn't even picked yet. The Mustang was my pride and joy, but it wasn't worth half of Jake's bet. Still, I couldn't shake the image of Jake brushing off Dad's toast, acting like we were all just extras in his blockbuster life. I glanced at Emily. Her eyes were calm, searching mine like she was saying, "You got this? No questions, no doubt? Just trust." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. Jake wasn't playing poker, he was playing power. He wanted me to fold, to admit I couldn't hang with him. But folding now wouldn't just cost me the pot. It cost me something bigger, something I wasn't ready to give up. "You think I'm bluffing?" I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not here to show off, Jake. I'm here to play." Jake's smirk tightened. "Then play, cousin. 10 grand. Or are you gonna waste my time?" The air felt thick, like right before a storm breaks. I didn't have the cash, and Jake knew it. He was counting on it. But I had 3 tens in my hand, and Emily by my side. I wasn't about to let him walk all over us. 10 grand. The words hung in the air like a bad smell. Jake's stack of hundreds sat smugly on the table, daring me to do something, anything, besides slink away. My 3 tens were burning a hole in my hand, but my bank account? That was a different story. I had maybe a couple grand saved for emergencies, not enough to touch Jake's bet. The room was a pressure cooker now. Aunt Linda was clutching her coffee mug like it might run off. Mike was shaking his head, muttering about crazy rich people. Dad's eyes were drilling into me, pleading for me to back down before this got any uglier. Looked at Jake. His smirk said it all. "You're out of your league, cousin." He wasn't wrong about the money, but he was dead wrong if he thought I'd let him steamroll me. Not tonight. Not in front of Emily, Dad, and the whole family. I opened my mouth, not sure what was going to come out when Emily's hand moved. She reached up, unclasped the silver necklace her grandma had given her, a delicate thing with a sapphire pendant, worth more in memories than dollars. Then, with a steady hand, she slid off her engagement ring, the one I'd spent months saving for, a simple diamond that sparkled like her smile. She set them both on the table, right next to my Mustang keys. 15,000, she said, her voice calm but firm. "We're in." The room gasped like we'd just flipped the table. Aunt Linda dropped her mug, coffee splashing her sweater. Mike's jaw hit the floor. Even Sarah stopped scrolling Instagram, her eyes wide. Jake blinked, caught off guard, but he recovered fast, letting out a low chuckle. "Wow, Emily. Didn't know you had it in you," he said, like she was some kid he was humoring. I turned to her, my heart racing. You sure?" I whispered. That necklace was her heirloom, the ring, our promise. She didn't even glance at my cards. She had no idea I was holding 3 tens, but her eyes locked on mine, steady as ever. "We're a team," she said softly. "I trust you." Right then, I swear I fell in love with her all over again. Who needs a royal flush when you've got a woman like that? But the family wasn't so romantic. Dad shot out of his chair, his face red. "Are you insane?" he barked, grabbing my arm. "You're betting her ring, her car? For what? Some stupid pride? Stop this now," his voice cracked, and I felt a pang. Dad wasn't mad, he was scared. Scared we'd lose everything to Jake's ego trip. Across the table, Uncle Tom leaned back, smirking. "Kid, just say sorry to Jake and sit down," he said, like I was a toddler throwing a tantrum. "No shame in knowing your limits." It stung. Limits. Like I was some small-time loser who should bow to Jake's big-shot act. I shook off Dad's grip, my jaw tight. "You know why I'm doing this?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's not about the money. It's about respect. Jake, you couldn't even be bothered to raise a glass with Dad tonight. You acted like all of us don't matter. I'm not folding to that." Jake's smirk faded just for a second. Sarah rolled her eyes, muttering, "Oh, please, it's just a toast." But I saw Dad's face, the hurt he'd buried all night. The room shifted, like people were remembering every time Jake had flexed his wealth or cut them down with a smile. Wait. Jake didn't flinch, though. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a set of papers, and tossed them on the table. "Fine. You want respect? Earn it. My condo in Aspen, 200 grand? Top that." Sarah gasped again, this time for real, whispering, "Jake, are you nuts?" Uncle Tom's grin vanished, his eyes darting to the papers. The family buzzed, voices overlapping shock, disbelief, maybe a little awe. 200 grand. That wasn't poker. That was a declaration of war. I froze, and my cards were gold, but my wallet was empty. Emily's jewelry and my car didn't come close. I could feel the weight of everyone's stares waiting for me to crash and burn. Then, out of nowhere, Mike stood up. He fished his truck keys from his pocket, his beat-up Chevy he used for deliveries, and dropped them on the table. "It's 20 grand, he said, glaring at Jake. "I'm sick of your showboating." Before I could process it, Aunt Linda stepped forward, her hands shaking but her voice steady. She slid off her gold bracelet, the one she'd worn since her wedding day. 10 grand, she said. "Jake's been lording it over us for years. I'm done." One by one, others joined in, Cousin Jenny with her earrings. Uncle Bob with a wad of cash he'd planned to use for a fishing trip. It wasn't just money. It was a middle finger to Jake's whole act. Together, we scraped together enough to match his condo bet, dollar for dollar. Jake's face tightened. He wasn't laughing anymore. "You're all insane," he snapped, but his voice had an edge now, like he was starting to sweat. To up the pressure, he flipped 2 cards from his hand, a pair of jacks. "See that?" said, leaning forward. "Think hard, cousin. You really want to keep going?" I didn't blink. I turned over 2 of my 10s, slow and deliberate. "I'm not folding," I said. "You want to see the end? Bet again." The room held its breath. Emily squeezed my hand, her ringless finger cool against mine. Dad was silent now, watching, maybe starting to believe. Mike gave me a nod like we were soldiers in a foxhole. Jake's eyes narrowed. He was trapped, and he knew it. But he wasn't done. He pulled out his phone, opened some app, and showed me a balance his company shares. 500 grand, he said, voice low, almost a growl. "All in. You can't touch that, can you?" I felt my stomach drop. 500 grand was a universe away from anything I could scrape together. The family's contributions were tapped out. I could see Sarah smirking again, thinking they'd won. But then I looked around at Emily, at Mike, at Aunt Linda, at Dad, all of them standing with me. Not because of money, but because they'd had enough. I straightened up, meeting Jake's stare. "I don't need to touch it," I said. "I've got something you don't, family, and we're not done yet." The table was a battleground now, piled high with keys, cash, jewelry, and Jake's fancy condo papers. His phone screen glowed with that insane 500 grand bet, daring me to blink. Jake's eyes were locked on mine, searching for a crack, a flinch, anything to prove he'd won before the cards even hit the table. Sarah was whispering in his ear, her voice sharp and urgent, but Jake waved her off. The family was dead silent. Millie's hand steady in mine, Mike clenching his beer bottle like a grenade, Aunt Linda barely breathing. Dad just stood there, his face a mix of fear and something new, maybe pride. "Call it," Jake said, his voice tight. "You can't match $500,000. Fold or show me what you've got." I leaned back, my 310s heavy in my hand. I could feel Emily's trust like a heartbeat, Mike's truck keys like a promise, Aunt Linda's bracelet like a vow. Jake thought he had me cornered, but he'd misread the room. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about every time he'd made us feel small, every smirk, every brushed-off toast. I set my cards face down, slow and deliberate. "I'm not folding," I said. "But I'm not calling either. You want this over? Flip your card." Jake's jaw twitched. He'd thrown down $500,000 to scare me off, but now he was stuck. If he didn't show his last card, he'd have to raise again, and I could tell he was starting to doubt his hand. Sarah hissed, "Just do it, Jake." Uncle Tom shifted in his seat, his usual grin gone. The whole family leaned in, the air so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. Finally, Jake snorted like he was above it all and flipped his last card. 7. No match for his pair of jacks. Pair of jacks, that's what he'd bet his Tesla, his condo, his company shares on. I stared at it, almost not believing he'd pushed this far on such a weak hand. Then I turned over my third 10, laying it down like a gavel. 3 of a kind, I said, voice steady. 10s. The room exploded. Mike whooped, slamming his bottle down so hard foam sprayed everywhere. Aunt Linda clapped, her eyes wet. Cousin Jenny yelled, "Take that, Tesla boy." Even Uncle Bob, who usually stayed quiet, let out a hot damn. Dad just stood there, mouth open like he'd seen a miracle. Emily threw her arms around me, laughing, her necklace and ring still gleaming on the table. I hugged her back, my heart pounding not from the win, but from knowing she'd bet it all on me without a second thought. Jake went white, like someone had yanked the plug on his whole act. Sarah's phone clattered to the floor, her influencer smile gone. "No way," Jake muttered, shaking his head. "No way. This was just for fun, right? Just a game." His voice cracked, desperate. Sarah jumped in, shrill as a car alarm. "Yeah, exactly. You're not seriously taking our stuff, are you? It's Thanksgiving." I stood up, crossing my arms. "A bet's a bet, Jake," I said. "No. You put it on the table. You said it was real. Don't back out now." I pointed to the pile, his cash, his keys, his papers. "That's yours to lose." The family went quiet again, watching. Jake's hands shook as he grabbed his phone, probably hoping for a bailout from some app. Uncle Tom cleared his throat, trying to play peacemaker. "Come on now, let's not get carried away." Jake didn't mean what? I cut in, sharper than I meant. Didn't mean to bet his car, his condo, or didn't mean to treat us like we're beneath him all night. I looked at Jake, not backing down. "You wanted to play big, you lost?" Jake swallowed hard, his cool guy mask crumbling. He pushed the stack of cash 10 grand across the table, then slower slid the Tesla key fob over. Nobody really thought we'd drive off in his car. It was the principle. The cash was real, though, and so was the lesson. He stood, grabbing his jacket, avoiding everyone's eyes. Sarah scrambled after him, muttering about ridiculous drama. Uncle Tom followed, pausing at the door to glare at me. "Don't expect an invite next year," he snapped. I grinned. Couldn't help it. Saves me on Christmas gifts. The door slammed behind them, and the room burst into chatter again. Mike was already joking about selling the Tesla for a fishing boat. Aunt Linda hugged Emily, calling her the real MVP. I gathered up the cash and started passing it out, some to Mike for his truck, some to Linda for her bracelet, bits to everyone who chipped in. "This isn't about the money," I said, loud enough for them to hear. "It's about us. All of us, standing up for once." Jake thought he could buy respect. He's wrong. Later, after the chaos died down, Emily, Dad, and I sat by the fireplace, the house quieter now. Emily slipped her ring back on, smiling like we'd just won the lottery. "You scared me for a second there," she teased, nudging me. "But I knew you had it." Dad sipped his coffee, looking at me different, like I'd grown a foot taller. "I didn't get it at first," he said, voice soft. "Thought you were throwing everything away, but you weren't, were you? You were fighting for us." I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah, Dad, for us. We sat there, the fire crackling. The football game long forgotten on the TV. I thought about Jake, probably halfway home, stewing in his fancy car. Money's nice? Sure. It buys Teslas, condos, big talk. But it doesn't buy what matters: people who'll stand with you, not behind you. Jake wanted to crush us to feel tall. All he did was show how small he was. As the fire dwindled to embers, the house settled into a cozy hush. Most of the family had trickled out, Mike with a fistful of cash and a grin, Aunt Linda still buzzing about her bracelet's big moment, Cousin Jenny planning a group chat to relive the night. The poker table sat empty now, just a few stray chips and coffee stains left behind. Emily leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, the sapphire necklace back where it belonged. Dad was flipping through an old photo album he'd found on the coffee table, pausing at a picture of us fishing when I was 10. Us. For the first time all night, it felt like Thanksgiving again, not a battlefield, but a home. Emily broke the silence, her voice soft. So, you gonna tell me how you knew you'd win? She raised an eyebrow, teasing. Or was it just dumb luck? I laughed, shaking my head. Not luck, faith. In the cards, yeah, but mostly in you, in all of us. I glanced at Dad, who looked up from the album, his eyes softer than I'd seen in years. I couldn't let Jake walk over that. Dad closed the album, setting it down. You did good, son, he said, and there was a weight to it, like he was handing me something I'd earned. But next time, maybe stick to betting Em and Ms, huh? We all cracked up, the kind of laugh that loosens your chest after a long fight. I thought about Jake, probably licking his wounds somewhere on I-71. Sarah posting cryptic quotes about haters on her Instagram. Part of me felt a twinge family's family, even when they're jerks. But Jake had built his own cage, locking himself in with every boast, every jab. He'd learn, or he wouldn't. That wasn't my burden to carry. Emily stood, stretching, and grabbed her coat. Come on, hero, she said. Let's get home before I eat another slice of pie and regret it. I grinned, pulling on my jacket, and Dad walked us to the door. Outside, the November air was crisp, stars sharp against the Ohio sky. My Mustang sat in the driveway, looking prouder than ever, like it knew it had gone toe-to-toe with a Tesla and won. As we drove home, Emily humming along to some classic rock on the radio, I kept turning it all over in my head. Jake thought money was power flash, a fat wallet, a fancy car, and people would fall in line. But tonight proved him wrong. Money doesn't buy respect, doesn't make people stand by you when the chips are down. That's family, real family, not the kind you impress with a bank account. Emily betting her ring, Mike tossing in his truck, Aunt Linda risking her heirloom. They weren't chasing dollars. They were fighting for something bigger, something Jake couldn't touch. Pride. Unity. The kind of strength that outlasts any ego trip. I reached for Emily's hand, her ring catching the dashboard light. I said, I don't care if we never get rich. As long as I've got you in nights like this, I'm good. She squeezed my hand, smiling. Same. But if we do get rich, I'm buying a better poker deck. I laughed, the road stretching out ahead, carrying us back to our life simple, messy, and mine. Jake could keep his condos and his clout. I had what mattered, and no bet could take that away.